The Chair's forward to our pre-budget submission, or the stand-in Chair, notes that a key measure to aid translation of the UNCRPD into law is ensuring adequate funding is allocated in the national budget. While the UN Human Rights document, Realising the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Handbook for Parliamentarians, identifies budgetary measures as being central to realising the rights of people with disabilities. The Oireachtas has an obligation to ensure that appropriate funding is assigned to the different sectors that provide services and supports, and this point cannot be overstated. Proper funding is necessary for individuals to realise their rights under the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Without this, the state is knowingly failing people, families and entire communities. Despite signing up to the Convention, we have a considerable way to go for it to be a reality in the lives of people with disabilities. If we accept the testimony from witnesses to the committee, we have to conclude that Ireland has a budget-based approach to disabilities, not a rights-based approach. One of the clearest examples of this is special needs education. We have many children and young people who are entitled to SNAs or resource hours, but do not get them because they are not available. And this is a budgetary decision, not a rights-based one. Over the past few months, I've been working with national schools across Cork South West, and I'm sure all deputies have been in their constituencies, in Schull, Ballydehob, Dreeny and Rosscarbery, who are entitled to SNAs and resource hours, but they have not been allocated. If an individual meets the criteria, they should automatically get the support they are entitled to. That is the measure of a rights-based approach. And perhaps I'm being naive, but it's the system, obviously, that we need to change. And in the meantime, we should have the decency, I think, to admit that despite what departments and even ministers say, we do not have a rights-based approach. That is just the reality we have at the moment. And the first step in solving any problem is just recognising that there is one. Every week in the committee we hear examples of state failures, apathy and even hostility towards people with disabilities and their families who have to fight and fight for access to home care, equipment, transport, housing, education, you name it, a chance to live independently. Recently, Samantha Kenny, a family carer and parent to a 6-year-old girl with a rare genetic disorder, 2 boys, 10 and 14, who are autistic, and a 15-year-old boy who has no diagnosis, described to us the struggle to access services, and I quote, "As a parent and full-time family carer, the last 8 years have been extremely eye-opening as an experience. I have come across obstacles I could never have dreamed of, and genuinely, the fight to not only obtain support, but also to keep it has been absolutely exhausting." She explained how they had to rely on family for a suitable home, having to constantly save to adopt their home, and fundraising for a wheelchair-accessible van. Also appearing that day was Damien O'Reilly, who has a physical disability, cerebral palsy, due to a lack of oxygen at birth. He provided an account of having to argue at work tirelessly to access supports for independent living. He couldn't go to college initially because of lack of support. He had to negotiate with the HSE just to get half the hours of personal assistance he required, and now he trains his own PAs. Then there are over 1,000 people under 65 years of age who are forced into nursing homes because we do not have the supported living settings for them to live with their peers in the community. In response to the Ombudsman report, Wasted Lives, Time for a Better Future for Younger People in Nursing Homes, the HSE committed to transitioning 18 people under 65 from nursing homes. That's 18 out of at least 1,300. That is less than 2%. I know it's a really complex area spread across different departments and agencies, but ultimately money is such a major factor here. The Convention is the standard we have signed up to. That is the standard we need to reach. Furthermore, this need is understood and has been qualified. The Department of Health's own report on unmet needs identified the funding required, 350 million. Despite increases this year, there's still a deficit of 300 million that's required for next year. And that is the report we have access to, and that's thanks to the work of advocates, and I suspect down to the work of you, Minister Rabbit. The Department of Social Protection Cost of Disability report has been with that department for months, remains unpublished despite requests from campaigners, NGOs, deputies and all parties, I presume. However, what we know is that on average EU countries spend 2% of their GDP on social protection expenditure for disability. Ireland's expenditure is just 0.8%. The second lowest in the EU. No wonder the consistent poverty rate for people with disabilities has risen from 9% in 2009 to 24% in 2017. The committee submission also notes that the optional protocol to the UNCRPD must be ratified urgently to ensure that complaints can be submitted directly to the UN Committee by individuals if they feel that their rights have been violated under the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. The optional protocol is a vital tool to enable people to enforce the rights acknowledged in the Convention. I firmly believe it will make a significant difference in holding the state accountable for the deficiencies in services and the barriers individuals face. We've heard from different experts, including the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commissioner, who clearly said that the optional protocol can be ratified at any point. They said it can be ratified tomorrow, and that the timing is entirely at the discretion of the government. The UN Special Rapporteur on Disability said the same. However, the government, following the lead of the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, argues that we must review current mechanisms and fully commence the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act 2015. This is despite the fact that many other states have ratified the optional protocol first and then put in place the infrastructure. It's an important step to increase awareness of disability rights that will hasten the necessary changes. I'm going to continue to push for this. Unfortunately, to date, I feel like all I've been met with is brick walls, and I hope that the rest of the committee will do the same. Disgracefully, it took Ireland over 10 years to ratify the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. We cannot wait that long again for people to be able to guarantee their rights. Ensuring the rights of people with disabilities are fully realised is a matter of resolve. It's about matching policy and rhetoric, and at the end of the day, it's about government priorities. I have to point out my disappointment that neither the Minister for Finance or Public Expenditure and Reform are present. Until those ministers and respective departments understand and take these issues with the seriousness that they deserve, individuals, families and whole communities will continue to face the barriers which we hear about every single week on our committee. None of us can doubt Minister Rabbitt's commitment to the disability matters, but she can only work with what she's given. Unfortunately, this relates to a larger trend where Cabinet Ministers have not appeared before the committee despite our requests. The Minister for Housing and the Minister for Health could not make time to attend. I do note the Minister of State in those departments, including Minister Rabbitt and the Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, have appeared and engaged genuinely with us, and you're both here today. The scale of failures and barriers we hear about, the suffering the state imposes on these individuals and their families deserves proper attention. If carers and people with disabilities are willing to give up their valuable time to appear before us on the committee, the very least they should expect from the relevant Cabinet Ministers is for them to attend the same committee and the likes of this sitting this evening. For this document to mean anything, for the committee to mean anything, we need a seismic shift in the budgetary response to disability. It's an issue for the Departments of Housing, Budgetary Expenditure Reform, as much for the Departments of Health and Children. Unless we push for this, all our individual and collective capacity for change, we are failing the people that appear before us every single week. They put significant effort and emotion into telling their story again and again to officials, and we're obliged to ensure that this is not in vain.
Thank you, Deputy Curran.